Picture the greatest geopolitical heist in modern history. A literal David versus Goliath scenario where the weak completely trapped the strong. I'm talking zero money, zero leverage, but somehow they still walked away with the ultimate prize, entry into the European Union. How did they pull off the impossible? Let's break it down.
You probably think countries only care about cold, hard cash, right? Well, you are dead wrong. We're always told geopolitics is just this ruthless, calculated game of economic self-interest. But this story completely shatters that myth. As it turns out, values can be weaponized. Morals, they're a trap. Prepare to have your assumptions totally turned upside down.
Here's the setup. When the Soviet Union collapsed, expanding the EU eastward threatened to balloon the budget by a staggering 20 to 66%. We are talking about an absolute financial nightmare. So why on earth would wealthy nations sign up for a guaranteed loss-making deal? Honestly, it makes zero economic sense. But guess what? They did it anyway.
Section 1. The calculations and hidden agendas.
Let's strip away all the diplomatic fluff for a second. Beneath all those warm handshakes, a totally ruthless calculation was taking place. Western Europe was terrified of the cost, and the club was basically split in half. Germany and Austria, they drove the expansion, but France, Spain, and Italy slammed hard on the brakes. Sure, they smiled for the cameras, but behind closed doors, they were absolutely barring the gates.
You always have to follow the money. Check this out. Germany held a massive 41.2% share of EU exports to the East. They stood to make an absolute fortune. But France? Just 7.4%. The brakemen had everything to lose. They were terrified of losing their cushy agricultural subsidies and getting flooded with cheap imports. The math for them was brutally simple. Keep the East out.
So here's the harsh reality. Most EU members had absolutely zero economic reason to expand. To protect their own wallets, the brakemen offered this fake compromise. They called it association. Honestly, it was an insulting deal. The West got to protect their agriculture and their industries, while the door to true membership stayed firmly shut for the East.
Section 2. The rhetoric trap. 4 countries fight back.
The game was totally rigged. But the East didn't just accept defeat. Oh no, they launched a brilliant, asymmetrical counterattack. Their secret weapon? Moral kidnapping. This is literally how you beat a giant. You weaponize their own public persona. You take their grand, noble claims and you force them into an impossible corner.
Think about it. They had no money, they had no military, but they had the EU's own words. For decades, the EU had been boasting to the world about being this united, pan-European, democratic family. They promised to overcome the division of Europe. The East realized something explosive. That proud, arrogant identity, that was actually the EU's biggest vulnerability.
Section 3. Hitting the weak spot. Public face-slapping.
It was time for the climax of the heist. The Eastern nations essentially grabbed a giant megaphone and called out the massive hypocrisy of the West. On one side, you had the promise, decades of Western speeches promising unity and freedom. On the other side, the reality, blocked trade and a new economic iron curtain. The East publicly slapped the face of the West for the whole world to see.
They used massive emotional leverage. Czech President Václav Havel issued this dark, dramatic warning. He basically said if the EU rejects them, Europe is going to fall to fools, fanatics, populists, and demagogues. Talk about a masterclass in public guilt tripping. The underlying message was crystal clear. If you reject us just to save a few bucks, the death of democracy is on your hands.
And the shaming was so incredibly brutal. It actually worked from the inside out. Even top EU insiders like Commission President Jacques Delors publicly attacked their own member states. He pointed out that you can't cry about freedom on Sunday and then block trade on Monday. The opponents of expansion were completely paralyzed. A no vote meant exposing themselves as greedy hypocrites who were destroying the European dream.
Section 4. The fatal community trap.
The trap completely snapped shut. Let's walk through the exact anatomy of this heist. Step 1. The giant builds a lofty moral persona. Step 2. The weak demand entry based on those exact morals. Step 3. The giant resists to save money. Step 4. The weak publicly shame the giant. And Step 5. The giant caves just to save its reputation. The EU was literally trapped by its own rhetoric. They just couldn't say no.
And here is the undeniable proof. When the EU finally opened its doors, who exactly did they invite? It wasn't the richest countries, it wasn't the most economically viable ones either.
They invited the states with the highest Freedom House scores: the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Poland. The EU was forced to admit countries based entirely on moral, democratic rules, completely bypassing raw economic logic.
Section 5. How the weak beat the strong.
This whole explainer isn't just about Europe. It's about the fundamental mechanics of power. Let's look at 3 explosive takeaways. Number 1, values are leverage. Words genuinely have power. Number 2, public personas can be weaponized. You can absolutely use your opponent's ego against them. And number 3, it only works if the giant cares about their reputation. The EU cared deeply about being the good guys. That vanity cost them billions, but it won the East their freedom.
You've just seen how the poorest nations hijack the richest union on Earth using nothing but words and a mirror. It's pretty wild. So I want to leave you with a final thought. Will you use this moral trap trick in your next negotiation? Think about it. Thanks for tuning into The Explainer, and I'll catch you next time.